Now, the Labor Party has officially voted to recognise a state of Palestine. At the party's national conference this week, the apparatchiks voted overwhelmingly to make it a priority to recognise Palestine as a state, if they get into power. This has never been Australia's policy, and it's not policy for the UK or the US. But under a federal Labor government, under Anthony Albanese, that's exactly what would happen. And remember, the conference decided not only that it was going to happen, but that it would be a priority. Over and above condemning tyrannical governments that kill homosexuals, that stone women to death for accusations of adultery, the same regimes that lock up and kill journalists, doctors and whistleblowers, that conduct inhumane public beheadings, and on it goes. None of these nations, none of these issues would be a priority for federal Labor, not even saving 2 million Uyghurs from concentration camps in Xinjiang. Labor is just worried about the democracy of Israel and recognising a Palestinian state, prioritising this above every other global foreign policy issue around the world. This is not only discriminatory, but it's arguably anti-Semitic. It seems that out of weakness, Anthony Albanese is following British Labor leader Jeremy Corbyn's pro-Palestinian policies. The Australian made this point. Its editorial said the ALP under Albanese clearly has not learned the lesson of his friend Corbyn's cataclysmic worst defeat for Labor in almost 100 years at the 2019 British election. That lesson was that pledging recognition of a phantom Palestinian state was not an election winner. This is one issue where we can all say that Bill Shorten had it right. Both he and Julia Gillard were friends of Israel, and Gillard almost lost her leadership over it. But listen to how slippery Labor has been on this issue. Penny Wong tried to say nothing had changed since before the last election, but that's not right. In 2018, party support for Palestinian statehood was not incorporated into the national platform. And here you can have a listen how Albanese defended the new policy on Fran Kelly this week.
So will Labor still pledge that it's a true friend of Israel?
Well, yes, because Labor supports a two-state solution, and it is in the interest of both Israelis and Palestinians to have security in terms of its borders and to have a two-state solution. And Labor has long been a friend of Israel, but we've also recognised that the dispossession of Palestinians can't continue into the future, and that there's a common interest there, and the international community has to play a role in a peaceful resolution of the Middle East conflict.
Highly respected senior Labor figure Michael Danby tried to speak out at the Labor conference against this motion, but he was censored, banned. This alone reveals the truly authoritarian nature of federal Labor. Speak up, dare to dissent on this critical issue, and you will be silenced. Now, tonight, Danby's about to reveal that there was another attempt to censor him. At risk of being further ostracised by his own party, Michael Danby joins me now from Melbourne. Welcome, Michael. Now this...
Well, thanks, Shari. I'm a big boy. I'm not worried about being ostracised. Don't worry.
Look, this all started when you ran a parody video on your Facebook page where you compared Penny Wong to Stalin. Have a look.
сумеет выполнить свой долг перед народом. Перед рабочим классом. Перед крестьянством. Перед интеллигенцией.
Michael, it turns out Penny Wong doesn't have much of a sense of humour. She complained and you had to remove her name from your social media, your Facebook post where you posted this. But then, you know, it seems like life imitated art because you were blocked from speaking at the national conference.
Well, it's clearly a parody. It was clearly an attempt at humour. I'm a good boy. I took down reference to her name. I'd only said that I hope I'm not treated like this tomorrow. And unfortunately, events turned out that that's exactly how I was. This issue is not that important in Australian politics, but what it does indicate is that we're giving priority to the wrong issues. Jeremy Corbyn lost in the greatest election in Britain, and Australian Labor should take the message of being associated with extreme causes affects people. In the north of England, they lost all of those Labor seats because ordinary working class English people didn't think Jeremy Corbyn was patriotic, that he was soft on terrorism. And I'm not saying that Albo isn't patriotic, but this resolution, unilateral, unconditional recognition of a Palestinian state given priority, Shari, is something that gives a very bad impression to the Australian people. And as for censoring me, I'm a 40-year member. I did all of the correct things. I put in a written and requests to speak against Wong's report, and then they all, like in that Stalin video, clap unanimously that her report was received. It wasn't supported by me and a number of other delegates at the conference, and I'd like an apology from the Labor Party for their treatment of a veteran member like me who wanted to speak out on behalf of a large number of people in this Australian great country who don't share those views, that we should unconditionally recognise a Palestinian state. So I just want to tell you that resolution that we put up, the amendment, had things like the Palestinians shouldn't be homophobic and they should not have anti-gay legislation in the West Bank, that they shouldn't do honour attacks on Palestinian women, that they shouldn't use Australian taxpayers' money to subsidise terrorist salaries, which they do under their pay-for-slay salaries, which is 30% of the Palestinian Authority's budget. These are all reasonable things.
Look, that point is something I've reported on in The Australian, and it's something people don't realise, that through our aid programs, we end up directly funding, or indirectly, it's through a couple of partnerships, but our funding directly ends up going to organisations that support terrorists. It's just obscene. Michael, what I want to know is, where are your colleagues on this? Why are you the only person speaking up about this? Have we come to the point where federal Labor can no longer be supported by Jewish people?
I think that's a big call. Jewish people, like all people in Australia, make their choices on the balance of a number of issues, but this has disappointed tens of thousands of them. They're in only influential in 2 seats electorally, what's now Macnamara and Wentworth, but people will have to make their own judgments. I think this is of wider concern to the Australian community in this sense, that there's already a perception, particularly amongst men, that Labor is weak on national security and weak on terrorism, and this unilateral, unconditional recognition of Palestinian state, particularly if Moan Barghouti gets elected, who's a 5-time murderer, in the forthcoming Palestinian election. So it's a terrible mistake.
What I want to just quickly ask you on this is, why is it so problematic for Australia to recognise Palestine as a state, when the US and the UK haven't done that? The Australian, in the editorial this week, the Australian newspaper set out a few of those reasons, saying that Palestine does not come within a country mile of fulfilling the criteria for statehood. It does not have a single centralised government that has the capacity to enter into relations with other states. Instead, there's often armed conflict between Palestinian factions, especially involving the terrorist group Hamas. And it also supports hardline Islamist fundamentalism. I mean, but why do you think it's problematic for this recognition to happen?
Well, Hamas is officially categorised by the Australian Parliament as a terrorist organisation. Are we going to to unconditionally recognise a Palestinian state run by Hamas if they win the elections? We can't. We have to consider these things in a measured and intelligent way. And we can't make an arrangement with all of these Palestinian factions because there's no single one that runs the place. You can't ask the Israelis to sort of make a peace treaty, organise a Palestinian state next to them, unless there's one central authority that is pledged to keep its promises, like you would with any other country. We couldn't make an arrangement with Papua New Guinea if they said that they were going to declare war on us and invade us, however unlikely that is. I mean, it's a nonsense.
You're absolutely correct. Michael Danby, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, and let's all have a laugh. Penny, lighten up, but that was a parody, that Stalin video.
Well, let's